Okay, so we are going to look into showing how Rolle's theorem works, and also how the mean value theorem works in just a second. So let's look at our equation. So we've got f of x equals x to the fourth minus 2x squared. So it says find all the values of c in the interval -2 to 2 such that f prime of c equals 0. Well, just to show that Rolle's theorem holds and it makes sense in this particular problem, um, if I were to say, like, plug in f of -2, I'm going to get -2 to the fourth minus 2 times -2 squared, and that is going to be 16 minus 8, which gives me 8. And then we've got f prime of 2, or excuse me, f of 2 would be 2 to the fourth minus 2 times 2 squared, which would equal 16 minus 8, which equals 8. So these two numbers match, which is what my f of a and f of b thing was trying to say. So these up here, this is a and this is b. So it says there should be some numbers between -2 and 2 where the slope for this whole graph is 0. So I look through and I'm going to want to find f prime of x first. That's what I need to do. So f prime of x pretty easily is going to be 4x cubed minus 4x. So I have these numbers. Now I need to know what values of c make that 0. So I'm going to get f prime of c. That's going to be 4c cubed minus 4c. And so when does that equal 0? Well, over here, how do I go about solving this? Well, I've got two terms. So if I have two terms and they both have the variable that I'm interested in, you need to look to factor. So I want to figure out what's in common to each of these terms. So I'm going to get, there's a 4 and a c in common to both. So if I take 4c away from 4c cubed, I will just be left with a c squared. And if I take a 4c away from that, I will be left with -1. So these are my two different factors, at least right now. Technically, this one over here is two factors unto itself. But I'm going to end up with saying that either 4c equals 0, because if this whole thing was 0, it doesn't even matter what this is. It automatically will work. And so you can see that c being 0 is an answer that would be fine. I also have, that c squared minus 1 would be 0. Because if that was 0, it doesn't matter what this is, it'll still end up being 0. Now, this you would get c to be positive or -1. So not only does it happen at least once, it actually happens 3 times. So c could be 0, positive, or -1. So this shows that Rolle's theorem does work. First off, though, this equation is obviously continuous and differentiable. There's no weird things that happen anywhere. So that shows you how that works. Now, another example. So this is where I want to look at the mean value theorem. So the points don't necessarily have to agree, but the slope will work. So if we look at this, so f of 1, if we plug in 1, we will get 5 minus 4 over 1, which is 1. And if we plug in 4, we will get 5 minus 4 over 4, which will give us 4. So these two points give us different things. And so what the mean value theorem says is that the average slope between those points is guaranteed to occur at least once between the 2 points. So what I need to figure out is my two separate things. So first off, I want to find what my slope of between these 2 points are. So I will find that over here. So my slope is going to be f of 4 minus f of 1 over 4 minus 1. So f of 4 gives me just 4. And f of 1 gives me 1. So the actual average slope of this is 3 or 3, or m just equals 1. So what this says is that some point between 1 and 4 on this graph, or on this function, that the slope has to be 1. And that's on this interval here, we are continuous and differentiable, which is something you want to check for, but they normally won't. That normally will not come up, that it wouldn't be differentiable in an area. So next step is we're going to try to find our derivative. So f prime of x. Well, it's going to be better to think of this graph up here as 5 minus 4 times x to the negative 1. It'd be easier to think of it that way to do the derivative. That way you'd actually end up with getting 0, because 0 is the derivative of 5. And then you would get you get plus, you get a negative 1 times the negative 4 times x to the negative 2. And that would entirely equal 4x to the negative 2, or you could think of that as 4 over x squared. Now, at some point between 1 and 4, we should be able to say that there's some value c such that 4 over c squared, that equals 1. Well, easy enough. We look at this part over here. So 4 over c squared equals 1, which means that c squared would have to equal 4. Which means that c would be positive or negative 2. Well, since we're only in this interval here, we're going to say c to be 2. And so that guarantees that there is a point in between the two graphs that work. So what you need to do is you need to figure out what the slope is between the 2 points. Rolle's theorem will say that the slope between the 2 points has to be 0. The mean value theorem says that the slope just has to exist. There has to be some slope. And either way, whatever the assumed slope is supposed to be, there is a point in the interval where the derivative is that slope, that average change over time.